Okay. So I put yeah, I have a couple agenda items. But I guess first we can welcome the new attendee. If you don't mind saying hi real quick, Dominic, and introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm new to this community. Uh, I work at Google and Google Cloud particularly, and my team is working on experiments, which means feature flags. So that's why I'm here, because I think it can be beneficial for us to cooperate and work on that. Google, of
Yep.
course, has some internal solutions, but I think we, like everybody, is trying to to participate in open source.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, welcome. Thanks. All right. So I'll just rip through my agenda. I don't think they'll take super long. So please feel free to add any items that you have or want to cover or go into more detail. I'm just going to give a quick update. We did release the spec 060 about 2 weeks ago or so. And basically work has been done to implement it. JavaScript is already live. So both the like experimental web version and the node or server side version is ready to rock. It was released yesterday. I will be pushing one more update, but it's just a pure documentation change, so it's not a code change at all. Java is underway. Todd is basically working on events. He said when he gets back from New York today, he should be able to maybe finish that up. So that's the last part of the spec that's missing. Everything else is ready to rock, and then we'll just hopefully be able to release it. And so that adds, obviously quite a bit of new and pretty cool features. And then work has started on Go and .NET. So the issues are created. Some people, like some of the spec has been implemented, but it's not fully feature complete. So if there's anything that's interesting to anyone, feel free to try to claim some of the issues if they want to help out to implement any of that. But I would assume, especially the Go one, should be able to be knocked out over the next couple of weeks quite easily. Any questions on that? Cool. Yeah, so hopefully we can kind of wrap that up for like the 1.0 SDKs fairly soon. It seems like the work has been kind of divvied up and people are working on it right now. So all good there. The next one is I'm working on an ecosystem page. This has been kind of like a long time request. Basically, it's like if you go to the website, it's quite difficult to know, like, I'll use Flagsmith as an example, like which providers are available for Flagsmith, or Go Feature Flag or whatever, right? And so right now you'd have to like go to each SDK and kind of like look through the list and whatnot. I'm basically building it's based on the Algolia interface, but I'm not using Algolia, and it's basically like a little search thing that you can like do all your facet filters and stuff like that. So hopefully I can have something available to like get feedback later this week. It's pretty close. Like it works. It's just I'm terrible at styling, so I'm trying to make it not look horrible. If I can get it a little bit closer, then I'll open up like a draft PR, kind of work through that, and certainly try to address any feedback. But the nice part is then we can link to it from all over the docs and send people specifically to that page to see what's available in what languages and things like that. So I think it can be a really nice place on the website. It's just a matter of getting it fully working. So yeah, as soon as that's ready, I'll post something in the channel to try to get some feedback there. But really, it's basically just like a very simple like search page with facet filters and stuff like that. Next one, this is a brand new, it's not a new concept, of course, but it's like a new part that I want to kind of float the idea to gauge interest, to see like, there's this concept of progressive delivery. It's been pushed out relatively heavily over the last couple of years, and it fits very nicely into feature flagging. And I'm kind of just gauging interest to see like from a open feature community and possibly even specification, looking at what we could do to basically try to come up with a workflow for progressive delivery. Essentially meaning like, what would it look like between like a flag management system and like a monitoring tool, essentially, to do this. And I have some ideas, but I'm just trying to like float it out there. Is there like broad community interest, or is it basically like a couple of us that's interested in, you know, coming together to possibly spec it out.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by progressive delivery? Because I think it might be.
So it would be basically like, if you think of like a feature flag, you know, you can typically you do different like rollouts or targeted rollouts. You could do a percentage based or based on geo or, you know, user persona or whatever. And you either have to, well, even in like the more elaborate systems, like you would have to build out like stages and say like, I'm going to roll it out to 2% of users and let it sit there for some amount of time and validate that it's, you know, working as intended before moving on to the next, you know, rollout phase. Trying to figure out what it would take to kind of spec out that communication between the two tools and what would be expected, especially on like the observability vendor side. Like, I think it's pretty straightforward from like the feature management and rollout, but like, what would it take? What would the feature management tool send to a tool like a you know, Dynatrace in this example potentially? And what would the expected, you know, results be to say like, yes, we're all good here to move on to the next, you know, phase of the rollout. Essentially, like you can kind of do it already, but it's pretty primitive for the most part. Like you would say like, what's the response time on this service? And I'm looking for doing it more granular. Like, what was the response time for users hitting this particular feature flag? Now that like query engines are becoming more powerful on traces, like that becomes possible. And I'd like to possibly think about what we could do of maybe specking that out, because it does affect OpenFeature in some ways, because it would be, these are the type of values we need to capture as part of like our SDK, make available to hooks. So then we can have like OpenTelemetry hooks essentially to add the correct metadata to a trace to do this. Like it basically already works. I've tested it out, but it's like, we also would maybe want to standardize parts of it where possible. So that's it in kind of a nutshell. It's still kind of a bit theoretical though, from my perspective. Like I'm still just trying to think of like who would be responsible for what part in this flow, and what would the, you know, kind of the payloads look like? What would this like contract essentially look like? And does it make sense to even be in like OpenFeature? Because it's not necessarily like SDK spec. It's part of like it's a special interest essentially, or
Do you expect like some flag configuration changes based on this? Like, I don't know, like switch off the flag automatically or all this kind of stuff?
basically, and what that contract looks like, I don't entirely know, but I would think like, you imagine like a really simple scenario where I go to, maybe before I even enable a flag, we could test and see like, what's the impact going to be, risk, whatever. If we click the button and we start with like 1%, and we very aggressively check to see like those 1% of users, what's, you know, the failure rate, things like that. If it's 100% failure rate on that 1%, we can abort basically immediately. Like there's no chance that that's going to be a good release essentially. And then you've just like completely minimized like the blast radius of that bad feature essentially automatically. You couldn't really do that traditionally without doing it with like a trace-based metrics generation, because you'd basically get like, it'd be lost in the noise. You'd look at the response time and you know, or a failure rate, for example, on 1% on, you know, that many requests, or a subset of 1%, like 0.1% or something, you'd probably never see. It would never cause like an anomaly. And so like that's kind of the core idea. Is like what we could do at these stages, what that communication would look like, what type of metrics would we like to look at. I think you'd basically maybe expand the scope of the metrics you look at, but possibly reduce the frequency as we get closer to full release. And so that's kind of the idea there. I think like it could be a cool way to get people to come together to come up with this like use case. And if we could kind of standardize it, then it could work between a lot of flag vendors, but then also a lot of like observability tools that are capable of that granularity.
I think if we go that way, we need to also to think about business metrics and not only like operational one, because I already had some use cases where we wanted to use feature flag turned off automatically because of business metrics. So it's not necessarily like telemetry things.
Yeah, I agree, but probably not at first. So that would be the other interesting part.
Yeah.
But I see Dominic.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah. So I think that's a very interesting idea, and probably many bigger companies already have something like that implemented. This is exactly as I understand that you have this very minimal progression of the rollout of your feature, and you want to detect very quickly if something is really bad. So this is kind of canary analysis, and you are comparing this instances when you have this flag enabled and the other which are not with this flag enabled, and then you basically see sometimes there is an improvement and the metric is going in some direction, and you know it, but basically the big change is more often a symptom of something bad. This is from the runtime perspective important to, as I understand, report those metrics. But from the other side, from the vendor side, it's pretty complex, because you can imagine the system when you have hundreds of flags and you are rolling them in different, aspects, and you need to, and if you have that mechanism in the background, in the backend, sorry, then it's really much better for DevOps or SRE to find the root cause of the problem. So this is pretty powerful, and I think it is something different than the business metrics, because those business metrics are rather in longer term, checking the hypothesis, is it a better conversion or not?
Yeah, it'd almost be like the next phase, I would see. Like at first, when you first release it, you'd be very aggressive about like, red metrics and like the kind of the important like health of the feature. And then as soon as it's deemed like healthy at a certain point, then you could move into like some kind of experimentation if you wanted to. And I think it depends on use case, but I think they're very similar. It's just like where you would do it as part of the maybe feature release life cycle or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's just an interesting idea. So I kind of wanted to float that out there and just get people thinking about it. It's something that I'm thinking about quite a bit now, and we'll see if we're going to, if it makes sense to spin off like a special interest group or something as part of OpenFeature to kind of see if we can spec something out, or what. If people aren't interested, then we'll then we won't do it. But if I think there is going to be some interest in this, and I think from like Dynatrace's perspective, we can help make modifications like the OpenTelemetry spec, or at least push for that, which then makes it very easy or easy-ish to consume it from like a querying standpoint. And that's where it becomes way more powerful than like traditional metrics. So, and then from flag vendors, then it's like, they're already doing a lot of the controls. They already have targeted release. Like, what does that communication look like? And then we can have like really interesting, lower risk feature flag releases essentially. Because you're not eliminating risk. It still potentially fails, but for like a very, very small subset of users, as opposed to 100% for a short period of time.
So yeah, Mike and I had a very brief chat about this at the beginning of the week, and I sat with some of the members of the Flagsman team and just sort of put together a super high level idea of how it might work. This just seemed like probably the simplest workflow. One of the things that's missing here that I've just sort of realized hearing you talk, Mike, is there's an aspect around the telemetry here as well. So having the Dynatrace or equivalent being able to say, this is the P95 latency for people with this flag turned off, and then this is the P95 for the flag turned on, and having that flag with the thing that's changing, so that they can, then there's no, you're not lost in the noise kind of thing. And there's different ways of solving that problem as well. Like obviously you could use OpenTelemetry or something like that, and some of the OpenFeature SDKs have that already, right? So that's something that's actually missing from here that would be important, I think. But the idea here was that ideally there would be no kind of interface to it. It would just kind of happen in the background, right? And then
Essentially, exactly, because we basically have already started speccing out. Well, actually, it's already in the OpenTelemetry spec for adding like semantic convention to the trace. Actually, it's a span event at the moment. And then so tools that are able to query spans and then generate metrics from that like trace can already grab like time series for, you know, or essentially generate time series on demand for requests that had a particular feature flag evaluated. And so it's basically like continuing to vet that out and then figuring out what metrics make the most sense. I mean, there's some pretty obvious ones, but maybe there's some less obvious. And then it's like, at what frequency would we want to check it? What kind of like, you know, rollout strategies would we want to potentially support? Because there's a couple different ones, and maybe you do, you know, the top three, you know, it's like a percentage based one, possibly like you know, user persona based ones in geo or something like that. I don't know, like that's a hypothetical, but you come up with those like groupings, and then it's like how what metrics we want to check at what frequency, what would we determine to be like a healthy stage before the system could go automatically. Because I really don't like the idea of like a system. I mean, it's fine, but a system that like turns it on for 1% for like 2 days and then moves to the next one like automatically. Like it needs to have like a quality gate of some sort, and probably more importantly, like abort extremely quickly if we detect like everything's failing, like no reason to continue on. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And I don't have all the answers yet. I just kind of am starting to think about it right now and wanted to kind of float the idea out there. And if there's interest, you know, we spin up maybe a, you know, a dedicated Slack channel or something and a couple other things just to talk specifically about that. Or we could do it in the existing one, but just see if we want to like trend in that direction. If nothing else, like I'm working on that basically. And so if there is interest outside of just even OpenFeature, if we decide it's not appropriate in the spec or something, we can maybe work on that. So that's basically it. Any questions or thoughts on that before we move on? Cool. All right, Stacy, it looks like you're up next then.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to create another newsletter, and I want to kind of keep this on a rolling basis, trying to publish a newsletter every month. So I'm thinking of doing it every mid-month. And I'm wondering what the best way to sort of gather all of the updates and feedback is from everybody in the community, not just me trying to gather everything that I think is important. So I was thinking probably the best way is just to create an issue in the community repo and have people contribute there. And then I will have like a publish by date that we can push it live. Does that like work for everybody? Is that a good idea? Is it something that people would be interested in contributing to?
Yeah, I mean, we tried something similar. It worked okay, I would say. So I think it's not gonna fix all your problems, I suppose, in terms of content collection. But
I can drive it, and I can put, you know, I can add things myself of like sort of what I've collected, and then if I missed anything, people can just add.
yeah,
to
I mean, I think it'd be a good way. Like if you write a blog or I do a conference,
Yeah,
you just
exactly.
add a comment there. So I would
Right.
recommend pinning that issue then in the repo for like the
Okay.
2 weeks or whatever, and then we can also pin it in the Slack channel for like the
Okay.
2 weeks, and we'll just rotate it as we, or month or however long it's open for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. Thank
But,
you.
yeah,
That's
sounds
it.
good. Cool. All right. Yeah. Any other topics or questions or concerns or anything? I think I posted the notes again one more time. So if you have anything, feel free to add it. If not, can wrap up. You guys can think about progressive delivery workflows. All right, cool. Yeah, well, I appreciate everyone's time. It was good talking to you again, and yeah, have a nice day.
Thanks, everybody.
Buzz,
All right,
see ya.
talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See you.